Good evening, everybody. We are live now, so just welcome to the Planning and Zoning Board November 15th meeting. Could have all members stand for Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. Good evening. I'm Vice Chairman Sadi. Mr. Quish, the chair, is not going to be here this evening, but we would need to take a roll call. In any event, Meg, if you would take the roll call, please.
Mr. Austin. Present. Mr. Castagnoli.
Here.
Mr. Hirsch.
Here.
Mr. Cater.
Present.
Mr. Collegian.
Present.
Mr. Moore is not here. Mr. Mortimer.
Present.
Mr. Sadi.
Present.
And Mr. Zaharidis.
Present.
Thank you. Just before we start our public hearings, I just want to let everybody know you're welcome to stay and join the meeting. There is on our agenda subcommittee reports. That is not part of a public hearing, but you're welcome to be present and listen to what's going on. We have no new business. We do have public hearings, and we do have the first one is number 0 Quarry Road, petition of Jeff Adelino for a waiver under subdivision regulation 6.4 to an approved subdivision to allow overhead utilities at map 101, block 807, parcel 9R, of which Black Lab Investments LLC is the owner. This was held open and Mr. Adelino agreed to go forward. Just so you understand, for the purposes of your petition, you would need 8 votes. You have only 8 people here. We'll be willing to listen to you. If you want to go forward and take that chance, that's up to you.
Certainly.
Okay, you can go ahead, please. Thank you.
So last time I came, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so last time I came before the board, I was looking for a waiver for underground utilities. I listed a couple reasons. Basically, the transition pole, which is pictured down below me down there, I'd have to put a couple more poles in order to accomplish underground services for the houses. Mr. Sulkus brought up the point that I didn't have a letter from the UI stating basically what I had stated. I've provided you with a letter from the UI. I'm sure you all have reviewed that, basically stating the same thing that I stated, that more poles will have to added and basically causing line of sight issues, pulling in and out of the driveways. One of the reasons I'm looking to eliminate underground utilities. So if there's any other questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I appreciate your follow-up. There may have been some members that were not here at your last presentation, and I know you have the picture that's right in front of us. If you could just briefly explain to the board members what the problem is.
So basically, this pole right here, they're considering it a transition pole. This pole is not allowing me to go to underground per UI regulations, which your letter is stating. So in order to accomplish underground services, right about here where my temporary service is shown, I'd have to put another pole in. Basically, it's hard for you guys to see. This is the driveway right here. There'd be a pole on this side of the driveway and a pole on this side of the driveway if I had to go to underground. That's why I'm basically trying to come before you. Now this house down here, I have a wetland issue going to the pole that's existing, which will make me put another pole in on this side of the driveway. So basically, I'm trying to avoid putting all the poles in just for line of sight issues coming down Quarry Road and people coming in and out of the driveways over there.
Thank you. And if you could briefly explain what the problem with the pole is.
Basically, what I'm doing is causing a line of sight issue for people coming in and out of the driveways, having poles on both sides of their driveway when they're backing out onto Corey Road, trying to look both ways down Corey Road, you're going to have a pole on each side of you, basically impeding you, or basically not blocking you, but impeding your vision coming down Corey Road.
Thank you, sir. Does any members of the commission have any questions? I'll look to my left first. Anybody? So, Mr. Mortimer, I'll recognize you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sadi. So basically, we're at a position where to get your underground wiring, you have to add another pole,
Correct. I'd have to add 2 poles.
2 poles,
Correct.
to go underground.
Correct. So I'm trying to avoid that and just go to the overhead, which is basically the whole neighborhood's overhead to start with. This is kind of I don't want to say a weird subdivision, but it's going on an existing road. I didn't put any other road in. I didn't have to bring other utilities in. Basically, when you do a new subdivision, we do all that work. So I'm basically looking to just avoid causing more line of sight issues on Corey Road.
Okay, and per the letter, you can't run lines over the existing poles, using the existing poles.
Yes, I can.
Can't.
That's what I'm looking to do.
Oh, you can.
I don't have
So
to
I'm reading
add
this
any
wrong.
poles, so I'm not looking to add any poles by going to overhead. I don't have to change any pole, I don't have to add any new poles going with the overhead services. So that's why I'm trying to get a
Okay,
waiver.
so in other words, this plan is adding lines to that pole?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'm reading the letter wrong, so thank you for that
The letter is
explanation.
basically trying to clarify, when Mr. Sokas asked me to clarify, stating what I had stated. So the UI stated what I had stated at the time, trying to avoid adding the extra poles.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from members of the board? Mr. Cater?
So the UI, basically, they're agreeing that the approach you're taking is the proper one. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. They're in favor of this.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there any reason we should not close the public hearing at this particular point? It appears, looking down both sides, that we can close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion by members of the board? Looking to my left, I see nobody that has an interest at this point of speaking. And to the right, I will then consider taking a motion from any member that wishes to. Mr. Collegian, I'll recognize you, please.
I move to approve as presented the petition of Jeff Adelino for a waiver under subdivision regulation 6.4 to approve subdivision to allow overhead utilities at map 101, block 807, parcel 9R, of which Black Lab Investments LLC is the owner.
Second.
Second by Mr. Castagnoli. Is there any further discussion by members of the board on the motion? Seeing none, if you might take a roll call, please, and if you would have me go last, please, as the acting chair.
Ms. Austin?
With the motion.
Mr. Castagnoli?
Yes.
Mr. Hirsch?
With the motion.
Mr. Cater?
With the motion,
Mr. Collegian?
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer?
With the motion.
Mr. Zaharidis?
With the motion.
Vice Chairman Sadi?
Thank you. I would be with the motion. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you.
The next matter is Attorney Nuff. We have actually 4 different portions of the public hearings, but they all appear to be similar. One is proposed regulation change 2-8, a petition of John Nuff Esquire for a change to Article 3, Section 3.8.2, Corridor Design Development District 3, Bridgeport Avenue Design Corridor District. CDD 3, Article 5, Supplementary Regulations 5.1, Parking and Loading Regulations, which we held open from September. Number 2, 589 Bridgeport Avenue, Zone CDD 3. Thank you. And petition of, again, Attorney Nuff for a special permit with site plan review and a re-subdivision to construct a residential complex at map 025, Block 207, Parcel 50A, of which Casey Associates LLD is the partnership, is the owner. This again was held open from September 20th. And this would be the 3 and 4, closed by December 20th, vote by March 3rd of 2023. 589 Bridgeport Avenue, Zone CDD3. Petition of John Nuff Esquire for change of zone to construct a residential complex at MAP 025, Block 207, Parcel 58, of which Casey Associates LTD is partnership is the owner. And that's actually the 3 items. Now, Attorney Nuff, we would need your guidance. These are placed in order, but I believe that we would have to address certain things first. We did hear you back in September, but if you can give us a brief summary of what has occurred, and
Sure.
for our purpose of being able to make motions, we may have to make more than one motion per public hearing item. Thank you.
Happy to, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the record. My name is John Nuff. I'm an attorney with an office at 147 Broad Street here in Milford, and I'm here tonight on behalf of CDP Milford LLC. By the way, it seems like the mic is a lot louder. If I'm too loud, please tell me, but typically we have terrible acoustics in this room. So if you want me to be louder or softer, please give me the heads up. The subject property is 589 Bridgeport Avenue. We're in the CDD3 zone. As a quick reminder, the Commission approved our regulation amendment for the CDD3 back in February that did a number of things, but specifically allowed multifamily subject to specific criteria. We opened our hearing on most of the applications on September 20th, but tonight the hearing is open on all applications. The zone map amendment, which got delayed several times because of notice issues, the regulation amendment, the subdivision application, special permit, and site plan. Those are all before you this evening. You'll recall at the last hearing, 2 primary issues came up from the Commission, from the neighbors. One was the height of the multifamily buildings and their visibility. Originally, we had to propose a maximum height of 55 feet. Just as a quick review, currently in the CDD3, the maximum permitted height is 40 feet. We propose a maximum permitted height for multifamily of 55 feet. After hearing comments from the Commission and from the neighbors, we were able to lower the height of the buildings, the multifamily buildings, from 55 to 50 feet. And so we'd be happy to make a revision to the regulation amendments to lower the maximum height from 55 to 50. There was also the question about fire access. You'll recall that the fire marshal had indicated that they wanted a wider access around the perimeter of the buildings, and our professional engineer, BL Companies, was able to accommodate that, and we have a letter from the fire marshal indicating that he's satisfied in all respects, and that is attached to David Solkis' memo that I just handed out to everybody. So I'm happy to report on a number of things since our last meeting. As I indicated, we were able to lower the height of the residential buildings to 50 feet, and we can, as I said, we can modify the revision accordingly, and our architect, Jim Ravello, will provide details in a few minutes. Second, we can show you an exhibit, and again, I handed this out just now. We can show you an exhibit that demonstrates that the neighbors on Meadows End will have their views substantially blocked by the existing vegetation on the southern portion of our property. There's a band of trees of approximately 150 feet wide that exists on our property before you get to the property line of our residential neighbors. And so while I handed out that exhibit, our landscape architect, Wayne Violet, will also be addressing you to walk you through that exhibit. As I indicated, we have reconfigured the site to create the fire department's preferred 28-foot wide access. We have the memo from Fire Marshal Sudin approving the plan as submitted. We can go through that plan if you like, but it is substantially the same as that we sort of did some nips and tucks and sidewalks and landscaping, but we still comply with all the regulations, and we can also comply with the Fire Marshal's request. We also have the memo that I indicated from David Solkis, which is very helpful in summarizing the changes. Indicates that the subdivision and other applications comply with the regulations as existing and proposed, and also provides some helpful background on our zone change application, specifically that it is the board's custom and practice that you would have zone lines adhere to the property lines. And that's one of the goals that we had discussed with David very early on in the application. Since then, as indicated last time, some other things has sort of shifted around a little bit. So the buildings on the south are going to be in that portion that's currently zoned residential, but it has always been the goal to have one zone encompass the entirety of this parcel. We're seeing the zone change map there. So you can see that there is the line through the sort of a red line that goes through the green section. The green section is the area that we propose to convert from residential to CDD3. This is also the area that, candidly, if you wanted to utilize this as open space under your subdivision regulations, you could do that, and we have other plans that sort of depict that. But David's memo also indicates that you have a couple different options on the subdivision. You can require an open space fee, and I requested in the meeting in September that you would waive that, because I think that is inappropriate in the context of a existing commercial property. But if that is not your preference, we can also dedicate that area on the south as open space. So the entire team is here this evening if you have any questions, but I just want to tell you we want to be concise and address the concerns that were raised at the last hearing. So we have Jim Ravello, who's the architect, who will discuss the multifamily residential buildings, particularly the lower building heights, show you a rendering, and just give you a better sense of how these buildings will feel, as well as a little bit of information about the refuse area. And then Wayne Violet, our landscape architect, will talk about that buffer exhibit I just described, a little bit about the site lighting. And last, before I turn it over to Jim, I'd be remiss not to remind, if I were not to remind the board about the substantial improvement that this will have, not only on this immediate property, but also the entire neighborhood, and frankly, on the Devon area as well. There is substantial criminal activity on the site currently, and it's obviously once this project gets underway, that activity will cease, and obviously this will put the property back on the tax rolls in a much more meaningful fashion than it is currently. So with that, let me give you Jim Ravello, and we'll discuss the building renderings.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Ravello. I'm an architect with the Martin Architectural Group. We work with private developers and home builders. I've been doing this for 34 years with this firm, and I've done all types of residential work. So I think I've testified here before as well. The one thing that happened, we were told that we needed to lower the building height to 50 feet. We've done buildings similar to this before up in Connecticut in several different towns. So what we had to do is, being that it's more of a winter climate up here, got a little more snow, we want to make sure we do have decent roof pitch. And what you can see from that building is there's a lot of back and forth of the facade. So the main roof, where you got the roof pitch up at 50 feet, that extends to some of those areas that are kind of inset into the building. And you can, it's really kind of hard to see, but on the main entry in the middle, the rendering, on either side, we took a little lower pitch and we put in a standing seam metal roof to give it a little more interest when you're standing back away from it, as opposed to being all asphalt. So I think that's a really nice design feature that we accomplished by lowering the pitch. And the other thing we had to do to lower the pitch, to lower the ridge height, was we had to lower some of the ceilings a little bit in the rear of the building as well, which again will add more variety to the elevation. So this elevation, it's a very traditional style. I think it fits well up here in the Northeast. So a lot of traditional materials is being done with. But there's three things we look at: the massing, the materials, and the colors. So for the massing, as you can see, as it's a 4-story building, you don't really want it to be one flat facade. You can see where the entrances are, the two stairs in the middle, we have recesses in there that kind of divide up the building vertically, We also have porches that recess into the thing, which creates more shadow lines. So again, you're not looking at like a true flat facade. You've got a lot of in and outs. If you look at some of the vertical massing, where we have the gable ends, we've got 3 areas where we've got some vertical massing going on in the building, which creates a lot of interest. As far as materials, we have a number of different materials. I think about 5 different materials. We've got the standing seam metal roof for some of those areas you can see at the entries, which is really nice. They're kind of at a pedestrian scale. You've got nice columns, nice front porch kind of to walk into your building. We have panels. I don't know if it's going to be cementitious or PVC, but you can see that the white areas in the middle and both ends, that adds a little interest. It gives it a little more modern, a little bit of modern touched in with it. But then the siding, we have a lot of normal clapboard siding, horizontal siding, and we also have cedar impressions. They're vinyl products, but the truth is, when you put a nice heavy trim on it, as you can see on that building, that really makes it pop out, and that vinyl really looks good in between those trims. So it's a very good-looking building. As far as some more materials, we've got the stone veneer. It's a little hard to see in this rendering, but that whole bottom front is going to be all stone. So when you come up to the building at the pedestrian scale, it provides durability. You can't mess with it. It's a nice material to have at the base of the building. And that also kind of gives it that traditional feel where that's kind of like the base of the building. And then you have the middle section, the 3 floors with the sidings, the 3 different types of sidings, and you transition to the roof and the gable ends. So you have a nice traditional base, middle, and top. As far as colors, we're just thinking of nothing really bright, right? A nice kind of subdued colors. I think that you see around here, we have like a slate blue and some grays, and we haven't really picked the stone yet, but it'll probably be some kind of more earthy tone color. Same as the metal standing seam roof. That, again, we're showing kind of a gray color. We may jazz that up a little bit. We're still looking at that. So I think when you look at the massing and the materials and the colors that go into this building, it's a very nice looking 4-story building, and there's a lot to look at. Lastly, I want to talk about the refuse building, because there was some question about how trash would be in an apartment complex. So basically, a lot of complexes will just have dumpsters outside, right? So we're not doing that for sure. Next, you might have a lot of people just put a fence around it, or you put like a trellis over top to kind of keep the view from people like in the upper units looking down into it. But we went a step further here, this developer, which is pretty unusual. We're using a compactor and we're putting it in a separate building. Some people get queasy about putting it in the actual residential building. People get nervous about that. So the nice thing is we're keeping it private in a building, but not in the residential building. So it's nice for our tenants, but it's also nice for the community as well. And the way it functions is you walk into the refuse area, and there's a compactor there. It's got a door. You put your trash in there, and once a day the compactor compacts it. I think it's picked up about twice a month. So that eliminates, really having a chance for a lot of smells. It's kind of contained. So that's a really nice feature. And then the venting of it would go up through the roof. So if there is any smells, it's kind of up a lot higher to begin with and can dissipate a lot easier. And it also helps with noise, because obviously compactors do make some noise. But again, it's within a building. And then it gets picked up about twice a month. We're also handling recycling through that building as well. There'll be a couple of slots to kind of dump your recycles into some bins. Now, there'll be a maintenance person coming and checking it every day. They'll switch out the bins, and I'm not sure how often, every 3 or 4 days, maybe somebody will come and take the recycles away. But that's all going to be looked over. So I think from a standpoint of functionality of trash, I think the building itself is going to be a very nice-looking building for the type of building it is. And again, we're going to be down to a 50-foot height. So if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Mr. Castagnoli?
Yes. Where's the refuse area? You said that the dumpster would be in the refuse area. Where is that refuse area?
Where is it on the plan? I think it's the lower left-hand.
2 things. John Nuff, the record. By the way, it's twice a week, not twice a month. But I'm going to walk over to the screen and point out
Well,
where it's located.
Okay. Yes. I think, I think it was twice a week for the recycles, and it was twice a month for the compactor.
No.
That's what I was told. Okay,
No,
that's,
okay.
that's,
So
Okay, so that's the main-
it's at the corner of the building,
well, it's a separate building.
huh? It's a separate building?
It's a separate, it's that,
That's a separate building? Okay. Okay, and how tall is that building?
I haven't looked at it for a while. I think it's about 20 feet high. It's not real low. I mean, the main refuse area is a little bit higher.
So it's not just enough, it just doesn't cover the dumpster, it goes higher than that?
It does. I mean, the compactor is within the building, so there'll be a
Okay.
large garage door. I think they had like a 14-foot high door, where if they
Okay.
wanted to have a little extra space for whatever trucks that
So there's going to be a
service it.
compactor in there?
There's going to be inside, correct.
Okay, and that building has a roof, or,
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
all right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions by the members? I have a bunch of questions when we're ready.
No, understood. We do have one more presenter, Mr. Chairman, and so I just want to make really clear for the record. Pickup is twice a month, or twice a week, really clear, twice a week. The items will be picked up. It is an entirely enclosed building, and I know that, the neighbors expressed some concern at the last hearing. We have our own residents in very close proximity. So in the same way, we don't want to bother, our neighbors. We certainly don't want to bother our own tenants as well in any way, whether it's noise or smell or anything else. So that's the purpose of having this separate contained building for all refuse, is to avoid any objective odors, whether it is going to be impacts on people who live nearby us or people who live in our own community. So with that clarification, if you want, we can also pull up the elevations to look at that building. But right now, I just want to turn it over to Wayne Violet, who's going to talk about the substantial existing landscape buffer on the south side of the property.
Good evening, Board. My name is Wayne Violet, Senior Landscape Architect with BL Companies, address 355 Research Parkway in Meriden. So if you put your attention to Exhibit 1 or EX1, it's shown on the screen, but you also have it in your packages. This is intending to provide an illustration, a perspective of land distance from Meadows End Road to the subject property. So starting top right, we've got a couple just representational images, street side images from Meadows End Road. We've got the representational buildings, the houses that are there in the front. The background includes that existing stand of vegetation that I'm going to talk a little bit about, and how that helps to add that buffer along the southern end of our property. So those are those images on the top right. Top left is just plan view graphic that shows the area in yellow is that land distance between the backs of the single-family residential homes along Meadows End Road to the rear building lines of our proposed buildings. We show a distance range on that graphic, which is 300 to 380 feet. The reason why we show the range is at its closest point, the closest building to the rear of our proposed buildings is 300 feet land distance, and as far as 380 feet. Now I'll get to the bottom of the page, which is a elevation or cross-section of that particular view. And the reason why this is important is to talk a little bit about that existing stand of trees that we see in the background of those top right images. There's approximately 200 feet in width of existing mature tree canopy understory between the existing homes along Meadows End Road and our proposed buildings on the southern end of the site. As Attorney Nuff had mentioned, approximately 150 feet of that existing 200 feet is on our property to remain. undisturbed. The southern end of our property is comprised of a wetland system. The materials in there are typical species that you might find in a wetland system, including oaks and maples. The stand, by our calculations, ranges from mature height in 50 to 60 feet in tree canopy height that makes up that particular existing buffer. So just wanted to walk through this particular exhibit. Of course, if you had questions, be happy to answer them. And I do want to finish, I don't think we have an exhibit for it, but I did want to walk through some highlights on our site lighting for the particular project, because I think there might have been a couple questions that came up last time. So I wanted to emphasize the site lighting for the property, which includes the commercial and residential piece of the property, all LED fixtures, full cutoff, dark sky compliant. The highest fixture pole that we have on site is up to 20 feet. The commercial side of the site, which is the northern end adjacent to Route 1, has a more commercial type fixture, very sleek, very slim. The residential side, we've included more residential scale and ornately designed light fixtures for the residential side. And we just wanted to make a point that there is no light trespass on the particular property, as we've done with our analysis and submitted plans. But again, if you have any questions relating to site lighting, that's just a little bit of a highlight of our site lighting package that's part of this application. Or if you had questions relating to landscaping or buffering around the site, we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Does any member of the board have any questions for the gentleman who just spoke? Seeing none, go ahead, Attorney Nuff.
That's all we have for you this evening. I know, Mr. Chairman, you said you had a number of questions. We'd be happy to answer those now or once the public is done, or proceed however you deem appropriate.
Sure. One of the things that I was trying to indicate to you, because if we don't give you a zone change, other things would not fall into place. Would we agree on that part of it?
That's correct.
Yeah, so if you could just summarize, we know that you want to lower the request of 55 to 50, which was originally 40. 4 stories is going to be an addition from 3. 38 dwellings, so 2 additional dwellings, but you're not indicating how many more units than that were approved before are you adding to this plan if we agree with the height increase, the number of units per acre, number of dwellings, and number of stories?
Sure, happy to. So, just as a reminder, in February we got just a regulation amendment approved, and we provided concept plans that are very close to what we are presenting in these applications. Those concept plans showed a total of 202 units. We still have the same number of units, but because of what I indicated last time of the site being shifted around somewhat, we had to put that same number of units on a somewhat smaller parcel of land, going down from like 12 acres to 10. So that increased the density. While the number of units remained the same, the density necessarily increased. We also proposed, instead of a maximum of 36 dwelling units per building, we proposed that to be 38 to maintain that 202 unit count. We are still proposing that 10% of them be designated as affordable units. Did I answer all your questions? Is there?
Yeah, I think that takes care of it. The first part of it, through you to Mr. Sulkus. Again, we're going by memory. I thought we approved.
By the way, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off. You also mentioned stories. What both David and Joe had indicated was that you have, and I apologize, I was not aware of this when we submitted the application, but the commission has eliminated references to stories in its height regulations. And so that's the other change, that in addition from going to 55 feet to 50, but also eliminate any reference to the number of stories and just keep it at a pure height issue.
Thank you. Just through Mr. Sulkus, was this originally before us and approved at some level?
The regulation to allow housing was back
Okay.
in the date that Mr. Nuff mentioned.
So so you're now asking us to change the regulations we had, okay.
Yes, so just to be very clear, the regulation amendment was passed in February. We made modifications, tweaks, if you will, to that approved regulation, and that was to increase the density from 17 to 19. We kept the 10%. We went up to 55 and now back down to 50. 10 acres in size, 19 units per acre, and so those are the changes, then the number of dwelling units in one building. And if you had also asked, Mr. Chairman, in which order should the commission decide to approve these, I think I would do them in the order of the zone map amendments, the regulation amendments, subdivision, special permit, site plan.
Thank you, and just for the record, I have an iPad, I'm reviewing your materials. But the most recent application for the zone change, which is August 10th of 2022, does not have any reference to the 50 feet. Everything in there is 55, so that's the only thing that's not, you've agreed that the 50 feet, so
Yes.
don't we need a separate document to be able to vote on that?
Well, I mean, certainly you have the ability. What the statute says about regulation amendments is that you shall act on that application. It doesn't say you have to approve it as submitted or deny it as submitted. You can act on it. So you have the ability to simply say, motion to approve the regulation amendment with the condition that the maximum height be lowered from 55 to 50 feet. And that's our regulation. So that's what I'm suggesting with regard
And that's
to
what
the-
you would agree to if we made a motion?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Are there any other questions by the members before I open this up? Mr. Hirsch, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Nuff, you're eliminating the stories requirement to this property. So in other words, it's going to be purely based on height in terms of the building of this residential neighborhood. How many stories are you proposing to put in for this project?
Well, it's 4 stories, and I mean, candidly, we don't care whether you keep it or exclude it. It was recommended to us by both Joe and David that because the commission has eliminated any references to stories in all its other zones and only refers to heights, that for consistency's sake, you maintain that here as well. If you wanted to keep it as 4 stories and 50 feet, we have no objection to that.
So it seems you came to us in February, you wanted 3 stories and 40 feet, and then you want now 50 feet and 4 stories. So are you going to come back in a month asking for 65 feet and 5 stories?
Absolutely not. And by the way, this is a legislative act, so it's not as if you're setting a precedent. So I can pledge to you that we will not be back for any increased height. The whole goal is to, because some modifications to the site plan were required, to maintain that 202 unit count. Listen, as you can imagine, there is a substantial amount of work that has to take place at the site, including a massive environmental cleanup. That, frankly, requires capital. It requires a certain density. So we get to 202 units, but we do it in a way that is still entirely respectful of the zone and entirely respectful of the neighborhood.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Do we have an administrative summary, Mr. Sulkus, please?
The applicant has submitted an application for a regulation change, and in accordance with the amended regulations, an application for a special permit with site plan review, an application for a re-subdivision, and a zone line change. The application has been previously reviewed and approved by the departments listed above, including Inland Wetlands Commission on July 7th of 2022. The application for a regulation change proposes to change the provisions of 3.18.2.14, including existing 40-foot building height to a proposed 50-foot maximum building height, which was revised from the originally proposed 55-foot maximum height. It also reduces the minimum amount of land required for multifamily residential buildings from 12 acres to 10 acres, with an increase in density from 17 units per acre to 19 units per acre. And as you heard, the number of units proposed has not changed. The maximum units allowed in a building is proposed to increase from 36 to 38 dwelling units. The proposed regulation has been revised to remove references to stories, since the term stories has been removed from the zoning regulations. Consistent with our regulations, building heights will be regulated by height in this case, in feet to the midpoint and sloped roofs. The application for re-subdivision is proposing to create 2 parcels from the existing commercial parcel, one for continued commercial use, the other for multifamily development. This re-subdivision is compliant with our current and proposed revised regulations. The proposed special permit with site plan review has 2 components. First, a proposed redevelopment of the facades of the portion of the retail plaza that is proposed to remain, and the reconstruction of the retail buildings closest to Bridgeport Avenue. Our review of these plans and elevations has determined this work is in compliance with our regulations. Second is the development of the multifamily dwelling complex consisting of 202 units spread between 7 residential buildings with an accompanying clubhouse, pool facility, and trash and maintenance building. Our review of these plans and elevations have determined this work is in compliance with the proposed revised regulations. The retail parcel will have 510 parking spaces, and the multifamily dwelling parcel will have 385 parking spaces in compliance with Section 5.1 of the regulations. Residential building heights are proposed to be 49 feet 11 inches, where 50 feet would be allowed with the proposed regulation change in height. An as-built survey will be required to confirm the mean average grade as defined by our regulations at the completion of the construction to confirm conformance with the regulations. The proposed zone change is to move the CDD zone line from bisecting the existing property to the property line. Typically, zone lines always follow the property line, and when they don't, the board has historically required them. The applicant is asking for this revision. The review of this application finds it substantially compliant with the subdivision and zoning regulations. The applicant will be responsible for an open space fee to be determined in accordance with Section 310.1 of the subdivision regulations, as well as any bonding, any work that may take place in the public right-of-way. The applicant has also asked for a waiver of that provision of the subdivision regulations, so they would prefer not to pay for the open space fee. And as we heard this evening, they are willing to donate open space instead of paying the open space fee.
Thank you, Mr. Sulkus. Just so we're clear for the record, is your presentation that you've concluded now, we're maybe going to public hearing, is about proposed regulation change 22.8? Is that all that you presented, or is there some overlap on the presentation?
No, the presentation covers all 5 applications, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So this is a public hearing. The public has a right to be heard at this particular time. If anybody wishes to speak in favor of or against the application, and again, it's in 3 separate parts. Anybody wants to come up, you can approach the podium if you wish to be heard. Please state your name and your local address.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Robin Lewis, Lewis. I live at 195 Meadows End Road, and I think I'm that little tiny house on the left of the bottom diagram. And the house to the right of that, I believe, is the gray one that's shown in the top right. That is the tallest house on our street. And the trees behind my house are very tall. And if that building is going to be as high as those trees, that is a monstrous sized building compared to the rest of the neighborhood. Even the rest of the commercial neighborhood is not that high. In fact, I don't think that there's any place, at least at this end of town, that is that high. That's 50 feet, commercial or residential. And we had been told that the same developer had built the units at the Muse up near the Parkway entrance at Wheeler's Farm Road. So we rode out there to see what those looked like. Those are 3-story, and there's 180 units there, and it's on 26 acres. So they want to put something even bigger on a little more than a third the size of what they have up there. And that was in the middle of nowhere. There weren't neighbors as close as there are here. I really do appreciate that you have tried to address the concerns that I raised at the last meeting, namely the trash for one, and some of the other things that we've talked about. So I do appreciate the effort to make things better for the neighbors. But I'm sorry, it's still too big for the neighborhood. It is just too big.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Kurt Rossell, 14 Lucille Drive in Milford.
Could you just repeat that? We didn't hear you as you approached.
Oh, Kurt Rossell, 14 Lucille Drive.
Thank you.
It just seems like kind of a bait and switch where you start out with 3 stories, 40 feet, and then now you're at 50 feet. It just bums me out. Those buildings will create shade for all of Lucille Drive, essentially, because that's where the sun sets. It just seems unfortunate. I'm all in favor of housing, more housing. My son just looked for an apartment in Milford for probably 6 months, and 10% are going to be affordable housing. That just seems sad. Now, that green area you're looking to change the zoning in is wetlands. That's my backyard, essentially. I don't know how you're going to deal with the wetlands and get rid of all the trees, which are a buffer between my house and this new construction. So it's just disappointing that you're going to change the look of my view and everybody on Lucille Drive who's going to be shaded by these large buildings. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good evening. My name is Bob Rich. My wife is Robin Lewis. I live at 195 Meadows End. I disagree with Attorney Nuff. I believe that the February approval was for 180 units on 12 acres, reduced from 15 acres, which was conforming at that time, and a building height of 40 feet. We polled our neighbors, and I've submitted a petition showing 22 residential owners who are opposed to this project, not to a 3-story building, and I understand you're disregarding the number of stories in favor of nomenclature and calling it height. It's still a 4-story building. We're opposed to it. 180 units versus 202, and now on a smaller lot. It's too big. And if you go back to the picture of the rendering of the building, it's not one building. It's 6 buildings. And there are 2 of them side by side. This is a monster project. And as my wife said, instead of building it on a larger parcel, it's getting smaller and smaller. It's already gone from 15 to 12, now from 12 to 10. Not from 180 units and 3 stories to now 202 units on 4 stories. And that's why we object to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that wishes to be heard? this portion of the public hearing.
Good evening, Thomas Rebello, 147 Meadows End Road, that's Rebello. About this project, what they said about first off with the lighting.
Excuse me 1 minute, sir. Could you just step back slightly from the microphone?
What they said about the lighting, they said about the 20 feet high in the front of the building. They said nothing on the south side, if the lights are gonna be mounted on the buildings. And those are going into the residential area behind them through the wetlands. Also, as of last month when I was also here, they said they weren't going to touch the wetlands. They just mentioned now that it's about 200 feet between where they propose in the wetlands. They want to decrease that to 150 feet, so that means they're going to fill in the wetlands. And like I mentioned in September, that it's easier to fill in a CDD3 lot than a residential lot, and that's basically what the purpose that was for. That's why they really want the zone. Going back to that, okay, was that. And also, once again, I'd like to point out the conservation and development for the city of Milford, which also states, just to refresh everyone, any development or redevelopment which occurs in and around this area designated to the man that does not negatively impact upon reservoirs, adjacent wetlands, and associated watercourse. The protection of these natural resources and provision of the protection greenway along the watercourse which empties into the Long Island Sound should guide land use planning decisions. Like I said, they always said they weren't going to touch the wetlands, and now they are. I am really opposed to this zoning change, and I just thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak at this particular public hearing?
Hi, good evening. My name is Suzanne Kamini. I live at 187 Meadows End Road. My house is to the left of that gray house at the top. I'd just like to say we had started a petition, and I took it around the neighborhood, Jones Court, Briggs Court, Meadows End Road, Lucille Drive, and a little bit on Sycamore. Talking to these people, a lot of them couldn't be here tonight, but as I see it, this is like condensed living that they're putting behind us there. These people on Briggs Court, this is going to be right in their backyard. I mean, directly in their backyard. These people are temporary living in this complex. These other us, my neighbors, the other people on the street have been living there and enjoyed their privacy. And now that's all going to be disrupted. And I think it sets a very bad precedence for Milford if you do not listen to all the people, although they're not here, have put their name down on the petition. Okay, and as far as the levels go, or the density, I mean, I think we talked about that enough, and everybody's concerned. And my other concern is, if it goes to commercial on the wetlands, what can they do in the future? I mean, all of a sudden they decide they want garages there. Can they push in, fill that in, and develop that? That was never answered. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak at this public hearing? I see nobody else, but for the record, there is a letter that came in opposition that was in the package from Adana Dutko, so that is a part of our record. At this point, you have a right to rebut those individuals speaking at the public hearing if you wish to, Attorney Nuff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I can be brief. First, with regard to the Muse project, it was actually really only 10 acres that was developable on that 26-acre site. I was involved in it. It is the same developer, but that was a 10-acre site as well in terms of what was developable. With regard to the views, yes, I think that the height of the buildings will be somewhat similar or lower than the existing tree canopy, but obviously if you're looking at it from the perspective of someone, perhaps in their second-story window even on Meadows End, the views of those buildings will still be blocked by those trees that are the same or taller than the proposed buildings. The wetland issue, I want to make this really clear. We are not filling any wetlands. We've gotten 3 separate approvals from your Inland Wetland Commission. I think you all know that you have a very diligent wetland commission. Mary Rose Palumbo is a very diligent wetland officer. We are not filling any wetlands. We are not filling wetlands as part of any application submitted to this commission, to the Wetland Commission, or at any point in the future. We would be happy for you to designate it as open space. We'd be happy for you to put a conservation easement on it. We are not doing any tree cutting or filling of any wetlands on the property. So I hope we can, as that means all those trees will be remaining in that area. And I will take any prohibition, any limitation, any conservation easement, any open space requirement that the commission wants to impose upon us with regard to that area. Whatever you want to do, we'll do it. With regard to the February approval, it was only a rate change. That night, or that process, we still had 202 units. And I understand that Mr. Rich thought it was 180, but nonetheless, I don't want to quibble about what happened in February. It was just a regulation amendment, but we had proposed 202 units, and the regulation at that time was designed to accommodate 202 units. He indicated that this is a, quote, monster project. I will tell you, it is a substantial project, and it will lend substantial improvements to this area. I think we all know what that property has looked like forever. I opened the hearing last September when I said, this is probably the #1 site in Milford that we all drive by and say, when are they going to do something with that site? Finally, because of great difficulty, because of environmental challenges, because of an overriding lease issue, because of the challenges of bricks and mortar retail, this site has sat fallow and an eyesore for decades. Finally, someone who has the courage and the vision has come forward to make substantial changes, not just by adding residential, by making substantial improvements to the commercial side of the project as well, and ensuring that there's a commercial corridor maintained along Bridgeport Avenue. So yes, I would agree that it is a substantial project. It's going to be substantial improvements, a substantial reduction in crime, a substantial improvement for stormwater. That's why the Wetland Commission was elated with this application. Right now, there's no stormwater treatment of any kind. We haven't really sort of gone into the stormwater issue because, I think this commission typically relies upon your Wetland Commission. But we'd be happy to talk to you about how the drainage is vastly improved over the existing. With regard to lighting, we are fully compliant. We're dark sky compliant. We have 0-foot candles, not only at the property line, but 0-foot candles at our limits of disturbance, which is where the end of the multifamily community is going to be located. The light poles in the residential portion will be a little bit lower than the light poles in the commercial, 18 feet instead of 20 feet. So I think that's all I have. If you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I just want to be really clear with regard to that wetland area. Nothing's going to happen there. This is a massive improvement for the city. It's a massive improvement for this property. We hope it's going to be a massive improvement for this neighborhood because, candidly, if it's not this, it's going to remain in its current condition. So we appreciate your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Just before we get into the questions, I just wanted to put on the record, there appears to be 6 letters in support. It's a little bit unclear if it was, some of them appear to be predating, so it appears to be from the earlier application, but in any event, they're there. Does any of the members have any questions for Attorney Nuff? I have a question. Why do we need more? Why do you have to have this change? We agreed, and you spent a lot of time explaining that's what you needed. Why do you need more now?
More
height? More units, more density?
No, I think that's the important issue, Mr. Chairman, is the number of units has always remained the same. What has changed is the lot line between the commercial portion and the multifamily. And that was, frankly, a legal issue between my client as the prospective owner of the property and the commercial tenants. And so therefore, we just had to slide those buildings back a little bit further, and as a result, we went from 202 units on 12 acres to 202 units on 10 acres.
Why wasn't this known before the first hearing?
You mean back in February? It was ongoing discussions, but this has all been part of the public record before this commission. It is not as if there's any sort of subterfuge or any attempt to manipulate the record before this commission. It was a good faith attempt to negotiate with our tenants. Those negotiations broke down, and in order to make this redevelopment happen, you need to reach a certain threshold, and that threshold is 202 units. And so yes, it got reconfigured somewhat, I think in a way that's still entirely comfortable on the site, but again, that's what's required for this substantial redevelopment of the property.
Thank you. If you could just stay for a second. Just if we can, this is to you, Mr. Sulkus, bringing us back to our discussion. Whatever we do tonight, is it your opinion and view that this is only affecting one piece of property, which is this address of 589 Bridgeport Avenue, because there's no other CDD3 that would be having this regulation change be applied to them?
If there is another CDD property that is 10 acres, it could affect them, but to my knowledge, there is not another 10-acre property.
Okay, that's right. That's what I thought. And then the last question to you, Attorney Nuff, and it's a matter of order, but you've not addressed us trying to change the lot. So there's something about a piece of property that's in one zone and the other part is in a CDD3 zone. That's not been addressed by you. I think you really should address that for us to be able to take action on that if you could. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Sure. I assume that you're talking about our zone map amendment application, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So thank you, Sarah, for putting it back up. So the area that is colored in blue is obviously the majority of our sites. The area that is a light green is also our property, but that property is currently zoned residential. How and why that came about, I can't tell you, but from the very beginning of the project, and we knew that we had this split zone between commercial and residential on what is one parcel that has existed for many, many years, David had recommended, and by the way, this isn't just in Milford, but this is consistent with wherever you would do land use, to not maintain that split zone, that it makes more sense to have one property be in one zone in its entirety. In addition to just having that sort of simplicity of having one zone for one property, your requirements or your regulations, particularly with regard to landscaping, have provisions that say where a project abuts a residential zone, and so when you apply it to your own parcel, that's a portion which is the residential zone, it really makes it difficult to try to decipher what the regulations are getting at. So at that time, we decided we're going to modify or make the application to amend the zoning map to make the entirety of the property CDD3. And so when you do a zone map amendment, in the same way if you do a regulation amendment, you have to ask yourself, is this consistent with the comprehensive plan? The comprehensive plan is not your POCD. The comprehensive plan is your zone map and your zoning regulations. Clearly, this change is consistent with your comprehensive plan because we have a massive CDD3 zone property to the north. In fact, it's all the same parcel, as well as the entirety of this stretch of Bridgeport Avenue is all zoned CDD3. So the conversion of this relatively small portion of the property from residential to CDD3 is entirely consistent with your comprehensive plan.
So that's what's confusing to at least me. We look at the diagram that's on the screen right now. What appears to be the top left, I suggest that's where the Walmart or CVS, I think it's a Walmart pharmacy is?
Walgreens, yes.
Walgreens, excuse me. And then the white area, is that the Taco Bell?
No, so working your way from left to right, you have Walgreens, Taco Bell. That sort of missing tooth is the Enterprise car rental. That is not part of our property.
Now, I believe that when we heard you the first time, the area that's the pharmacy and the area that is the Enterprise was not part of the CDD3, was that, or am I just wrong?
No, that's all part of the CDD3.
Okay. Where's the residential area that we're looking at that you want us to change the zone map for?
Well, so it's really just that green portion. So what we've done is we're not changing the zone in order to allow us the ability to do residential. We're doing the regulation amendments to allow us to do residential in the CDD3. So you have sort of this layered aspect to this. One is, let's make the entire site, the entire property, one zone, CDD3, and then once it's one zone, we'll amend the CDD3 regulations to allow this use. And that's pretty much what you did back in February. You made multifamily a permitted use in the CDD3.
So I'm just still confused. Okay, is that green area that we're referring to?
Yes. Right.
Okay.
That green area is the property that's currently zoned residential that we propose to change to CDD3. Just south of that line, that between the blue and the green, is where the rear of the buildings are going to sit. So even though we're proposing that this entirety of the green area be converted to CDD3, that area is also where the wetlands are located, and that's the area where I said we would accept an open space requirement, a conservation easement, whatever it is that you want to do, so that even though it's zoned CDD3, so we can never build on it other than what's depicted on the site plans that are before you.
Did you own that property at the first application before us?
Back in February, yes.
Why didn't you propose that to us when we had this before us originally?
I think we are still working. We wanted to make sure we have the ability to do multifamily there. So, so that was the purpose.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members that have any questions at this point?
Will leaving that green have any effect on your current proposal?
It will have the impact that the rear of the portion of the southernmost buildings will be located not in the CDD3, but in the residential zone. So it would eliminate those buildings. But the idea is that whether by open space or conservation easements, that the vast majority of that area will remain undeveloped.
So you need that green to turn blue in order to do your project?
We needed to turn blue. I mean, frankly, you could push the line back, 10 feet or so, and we could do our project. But as I said, it won't have any material impact. It won't have any practical impact because you can designate it as open space.
Thank you, Mrs. Irides. Anybody else? Mr. Mortimer?
Yes,
Thank you.
I just have, if we could revisit the buffer zone.
Sure.
Are you planning to plant mature trees that will be close to the 50-foot height, or what is the plan there?
So, I mean, we certainly can't plant 50-foot trees, but the folks on Meadows End, already have the protection of the existing mature trees that are 50 feet or more in height. And again, I think the purpose of the exhibit that Wayne showed you was that the vast majority of those trees are located on our property in the area that we want to rezone to CDD3 and in the area that I would be happy to accept a conservation or an open space designation. So if the neighbors were to say, well, what if we cut down the trees that are on our property? Well, there's still 160 feet of trees that are on our property that will always remain there.
I see. Okay, and do you have a plan for these trees? Are they going to be deciduous trees, pine trees? Or?
Right, so many of those trees are deciduous. I'm not going to tell you otherwise, but we are also planting, our own evergreen trees. Wayne would be happy to walk you through the landscape plan, around the perimeter if you like. But certainly it would be literally impossible to plant a 50-foot tree, but we are supplementing the existing vegetation with our own.
Correct. Well, my concern is the residents wanting to not be looking at a large building.
No, right, I get that.
So,
Their concern is that I think you can tell, those photos we're taking in the fall, I can see the changing leaves. Certainly, when the leaves are down, there's going to be a little less opaqueness, for lack of a better word. But nonetheless, there will be some shielding between the buildings and their homes. And I would still submit that, based upon the current condition of that site versus the proposed condition of the site, I would still contend that the neighbors would be, better positioned or better off with the new multifamily community there than, frankly, the eyesore that it is now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the gist of my question, basically. Also, how close is that compactor to the nearest residence, that compactor house for the garbage?
Right. So the whole idea of that refuse area, we'll call it, is to be entirely contained, and so that it doesn't have any impact on anyone. So our neighbors are about 300 feet or so away from that building, while our own tenants are 30, 40 feet away. So certainly, in the same way, we don't want to have any negative impacts on our own tenants that are literally right next door. We certainly won't have any impacts on the people who are several hundred feet away.
Correct. Yeah, I'm just looking to get a scope here. One final thing, we're working on regulations for electric charging stations.
Yep.
On larger properties such as these. I haven't seen any mention.
No,
Is that in the
we
plan?
actually have those. I think we have 4 different locations for EV charging. If you give me a minute, we can find them, but those are provided, and I should remind you that we also have imposed upon ourselves the requirement for solar panels, and those solar panels are going to be located on the clubhouse, and with sufficient capacity. So when you have solar panels, you put that energy out on the grid, but it makes up for the energy usage for the clubhouse as well as the site lighting.
Correct. And so that would include the retail area as well?
I'm sorry?
The charging stations in the retail area as well, or?
No, they're located in the commercial area. I mean the residential area.
Okay. Excuse me. Sorry about my voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? Mr. Hirsch?
I just want to be clear. In February of 2022, we approved 6 buildings, correct?
No, you did not approve any buildings.
We did not approve buildings, okay.
No. All you approved was a regulation amendment.
Okay, fair enough. And the regulation called for, I believe it was 202 units back then?
Well, if you did the math, it was 202 units, yes.
Okay. And now how many units, even though you're going to go up 10 feet, you're not going to increase the number of units?
No.
So then why go up 10 feet?
Because the area of the land on which those 200 units would be located got smaller.
Yeah. Except units, if the number of buildings, just trying to do the math here. 12 acres to 10. These- Okay. Are the size of each unit going to change?
No. So, I mean, they're going to be the customary, unit size that you expect, 750 to 1,000 square feet or so. I mean, so the unit size themselves has not changed.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else on the board wishing to be asking any questions?
Mr.
Mr.
Knapp,
Zarides, yes, sir.
just to follow up on Mr. Sadi before you were, what's happened here is we've approved, but the density has changed, the number of units has changed based upon your previous kind of proposal.
The number of units.
The number of units hasn't changed, I'm sorry, the density has changed.
Yes.
Therefore, that's requiring you to go higher, put more units into, we approved the regulation one way because you had your line moved. You're trying to use the same 202 units into a smaller area.
Agreed, yes.
And now you're coming back to us again to change what we already agreed to. Eventually,
Yes.
Essentially, correct?
Yes, yes.
Was there an effort made by you folks or your clients to make it work within the existing space without having to come back to us?
Yes, and candidly, it just didn't work. I mean, it would mean the difference between the site being redeveloped and not redeveloped. It's that impactful.
Thank you, Mrs. Irides. Mr. Hurst?
So what you're saying is that it's not like you could reduce it to 180 units. You're saying it would not be economically feasible to make it, say, 175 or 170 units?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, thank you.
So here's the interesting discussion that we would have with you. The first two items that are before us have to close within 9 days of this meeting. And you would need certain votes. Some appear to be supermajorities are required, and we only have 8 members of the board here. So if the board members do agree, we could close the meeting, but the question is, do you want us to close the meeting and take a vote tonight with only 8 members present?
Well, let's be clear on the number of votes required. So what the statutes say is that on a legislative act, the zone change and the reg change, we need a majority of the seats. Majority of the seats. So there's 8 of you here. If I only need a majority of the vote of the number of people here, it would be 5. But I need a majority of the seats, which would be 6. So for the zone change and reg change, I need 6 votes. I haven't seen a petition protesting the zone change that complies with the statute. So we still need 6 votes out of 8 for the zone change and reg change, and because we need a simple majority on the other ones, that would also be, 5 out of 8. But you bring up a good point, Mr. Chairman. Milford is a little unusual that you have a 10-member board, which is far larger than many other municipalities, and as a result, you don't have any alternates. And so we're sort of run into this issue on legislative acts that, it's like you go to the ZBA, you need 4 votes, and there's only 4 members there. So the question is, what do you do? Candidly, the simplest thing for me to do is ask you, while the hearing is open and we can make this decision, is, do any of you have any substantial concerns that would prevent you from voting yes? And if you did, then I would say let's keep the hearing open and let's, we'll deal with that when the chairman and I forget who else is, Mr. Moore are here. But if no one has any substantial concerns, I think we'd like to close and get a vote. But we're sort of in a uneasy position, and I won't say otherwise. But I think that's one possible solution.
Thank you for your comments on the matters that have to close by the 24th of November. What about the issue of the closing by December 20th of 22? Do you have the same opinion that we should consider possibly closing that, or do you want to wait till we get the full board here?
Yeah, and as I said, I think we need to be clear that there should be a certain sequence in the votes, and while the zone map amendment just opened this evening, I think that's the one that you need to act upon first, and then go through the remaining ones.
and through to Mr. Sulkus, the zone change is going to require how many affirmative votes to pass, please?
The zone change requires, let me just make sure I'm reading the right one, a simple majority.
Of board members present or the
Simple
board?
majority present required to pass.
Okay.
The one thing everyone has to keep in mind is that one item would require 8 votes, and that would be if you wanted to waive the open space fee. But if the applicant is willing to donate for open space, that section, those wetlands, to take the place of the fee for open space, they can do that. And the subdivision regulations call out natural resource protection. So that would be one of the bases to accept that, as well as environmental education, because the Inland Wetlands Board has required a bunch of things, public postings and signage for educational purposes to preserve those wetlands. So on 2 counts, having them donate the wetlands as open space would qualify under the subdivision regulations.
Thank you. And the last thing, because it was mentioned by Attorney Nuff, and I thought we saw this, has there been a verified protest under Section 10.5 for any portion of these public hearings and the matters of which were being heard tonight?
No, there hasn't.
Okay, I heard you mention that, but apparently according to city planner, or is there some verified protest you're aware of?
No. And by the way, that only applies to zone changes. And it has to be, 20% of the lots within 500 feet, and it only applies to zone changes. It doesn't apply to any of our other applications.
I appreciate you mentioned it. I want to verify that there appears to be no verified protest. Okay, so this is where we are. If we could, please, lady members of the board, do we want to close the public hearing tonight? And we would have a discussion. We could take a vote if we felt it was appropriate. I'd just like to get some idea what the board members would like, please.
Mr. Chairman, we closed the public hearing tonight. The vote could be taken at the next meeting or the meeting after, right? Vote by January 28th.
That appears to be correct.
Okay, so we can just close the public hearing if everybody's agreed and just delay the vote. And give us more time to study the proposal.
Anybody have any other thoughts concerning that? Mr. Hirsch, please.
Yeah, I don't know why we need to propose to vote, because what makes you think when you come back in 2 weeks, you're going to have more than 8 people?
Could you just repeat that, please?
What I'm saying is we have 8 people today to vote. You come back in a couple weeks for the voting, there's no guarantee you're going to have the full board here.
Okay. But the point is you agree in closing the...
I agree you should close the hearing, but I think we should vote today. There's no guarantee we could have 6 next time.
Well, you have another meeting after that you can vote at.
In any event, if I might interrupt, the point is the discussion is whether we close the hearing. It appears all members in the board are in agreement, and I agree with that. So at this point, we're going to close the public hearing.
All right, and by the way, just as a point of order, Mr. Chairman, if you're asking our preference, we prefer that you vote this tonight as well.
Could you just say that again? I couldn't hear you. It's hard to hear tonight.
I'm sorry. And just as a point of order, if you're asking what our preference would be that you vote tonight as well. I mean, candidly, Kmart's coming down. We would love to get started.
Thank you very much. I heard you the first time. So, point where we have a discussion before a motion, and that discussion can be about whether we vote tonight, can be about if we vote tonight, what we do. So I will listen to those on my left. If anybody wants to make any comments. Mr. Hirsch?
I think people need to understand it's almost like being held hostage in a way. If we don't agree to this change, it looks like that will scuttle the deal, and we're going to have a continued blighted property at 589 Bridgeport Avenue into perpetuity. So if you are inclined to vote no, just know what you're voting for. You're voting for a scuttled deal, and the continued blight in an area that I think needs something.
Any other comments from the left side? Okay, anybody on the right side? Mr. Cater?
If we vote, I do want to have included something about the open space being donated, definitely, and reassure about the EV parking and the solar panels. He said he had it there, but I'd like that somehow included in that as well.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Sulkus.
I would recommend that an open space easement be put on this. That way, it's preserved in perpetuity, and at the same time, the city will continue to get taxes for that property, since it would have to be still owned and maintained by the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Sulkus. And just, because I'm not going to be making motions tonight, nor seconding them unless it's required, but if somebody was to vote on the proposed regulation change, just for purposes of the agreement by counsel for the petitioner, you would indicate that the condition would be 3.8.2.14, subparagraph 5 would be the 50 feet. Subparagraph 5 would be the 50 feet, because it's 55 on the application. So with that being said, if there's anybody that wishes to make a motion, looks like we have nothing to say at this point. Before we get to a motion, I will look to my right or left, whoever wants to make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Mortimer, I recognize you. Thank you.
The motion is the number 3.
Be number 2, Mr. Mortimer.
Regulation change. Thank you, Chairman Sadi. I move to approve as presented the petition, John Nuff Esquire, for a change to Milford zoning regulations, Article 3, Section 3.18.2, Corridor Design Development District 3, Bridgeport Avenue Design Corridor, District, CDD 3, and Article 5, Supplementary Regulations, Section 5.1, Parking and Loading Regulations, effective date December 9th, 2022.
Before I recall for a second, would you consider an amendment, as I suggested, that you would move to approve with the following modification of subparagraph 5 would be listing 50 feet as opposed to 55 feet?
Yes, sir. I would include that in the motion.
Thank you. And is there a second to that?
Second.
I note Nancy Austin made the second. Any further discussion on the matter, Mr. Cater?
Which part of this is section number 2? Which part of the entire thing we've been talking about is section number 2, specifically?
The 50 feet?
The height, okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's the height of the buildings?
So much going on here.
Yes, I agree. So in subparagraph 5 of the proposed text, it has 55 feet, and Attorney Nuff has indicated that they would agree to 50 feet. So we would have to modify, that's why I suggested you approve it with the following modification. So it's subparagraph 5 of 3.8.2.14, and instead of saying 55 feet, it would say 50 feet. That's the height of the building. Mr. Cater, did you have a question, or?
It was brought up about this would only apply to 10 acres or more. I'm concerned about that. How is that getting in there, that it's not going to apply to every other zone, property in that zone?
Mr. Sulkus, maybe you could answer that question, please.
So for a development of this type, which is multifamily in the CDD 3, you need a minimum lot size of 10 acres. So if there are any other parcels in the district that are 10 acres, again, this is a regulation change that is for the zone. This applicant's asking to change the zoning regulations that will affect this property, but anybody else who meets the same criteria would be able to take advantage of those regulations. But one of the conditions to take advantage of the regulation is you have to have a minimum 10 acres. and I don't believe that there are any other parcels within that zone that have it. Could someone at some point assemble 10 acres? It's possible, and then they could take advantage of the same regulations, which would mean that they'd be visiting you for, their special permit and site plan approvals.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Mr. Cater?
I think so. I'm still not quite clear how this is saying anything about 10 acres. I mean, it's saying CDD 3. How is it?
I sit corrected. It's a minimum 15 acres because I forgot to include the commercial portion that was there.
Good enough.
Any other questions or thoughts? So I'll speak very briefly. I have a concern that this should have been before us originally. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to have decided, but also there's a substantial opposition to the project that's proposed now. We agreed to that earlier. Right now, I'm not really in favor of it, but I'm going to listen to the other members of the board and their votes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would rather wait for a better proposal. I don't think this is the last proposal we're ever going to get on this parcel, okay? It's not we're being presented with a take it or leave it, and I don't think that's the case, okay? I think we should wait for a better proposal for this parcel.
Agree.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Hirsch.
I'm not sure there is a better proposal, and why take a chance? And you're going up 10 feet, and the trees, I think, sufficiently block the neighbor's view of this property, including the lighting. I think this is a very reasonable proposal, and this is an issue of economic development, because it's not just residential, it's commercial too. So if you want to scuttle the deal, you can go ahead and do that and vote against it, but every action has a consequence, and if you want to take the consequence, go right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, there's nothing wrong with waiting.
If I can have 1 second. Let me recognize, thank you, Mr. Hirsch. Mr. Castagnoli, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there's no harm in waiting, okay? No, there is not another deal tonight, okay, but we can wait for a better proposal, okay? And it will come.
Thank you. Looks like we've all been heard. Nobody else wants to be heard. That's fine. If you might call the vote, please.
Ms. Austin.
With the motion.
Mr. Castagnoli.
No.
Mr. Hirsch.
With the motion.
Mr. Cater.
No.
Mr. Cater, you're against the motion?
I'm against the motion, sorry, yes, against it.
Mr. Collegian.
I'm with the motion.
Mr. Mortimer.
I am with the motion.
Mr. Zaharidis.
Against.
And Vice Chairman Sadi.
I'm against the motion.
You have a tied vote, which means the motion fails.
If we just would get a totals again, please.
You have 4-4. You have Ms. Austin for the motion, Mr. Castagnoli against the motion, Mr. Hirsch for the motion, Mr. Cater against the motion, Mr. Collegian for the motion, Mr. Mortimer for the motion, Mr. Sadi against the motion, Mr. Zaharidis against the motion. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 with the motion, 1, 2, 3, 4 against the motion, which is a tie, which means the motion fails.
So, as far as any other of the activity, Mr. Sulkus, can we vote on any of the other items regarding 589 Bridgeport Avenue now that the regulation zone change has failed?
Well, the only thing you could, well, the site plan special permit now would not work because it is based on the regulation change, which just failed. What you could vote on is the zone change, because that, again, is not connected to, doesn't have to be connected to an application. And again, historically, when we've come across properties, whether or not there's an application or no application, when someone asks to fix a bifurcation of the property and move the zone line to the property line, the board has done so.
So just if you could help us on this, Mr. Sulkus. Number one, proposed zone change. Number two, 589 Bridgeport Avenue, is that the changing of the lot line?
Are you going by the agenda, or are you if you're going on the agenda, it's item number 3, which is a petition of the zone change. On your motions, it is item number item number 2. Yes, I'm sorry, item number 3 as well on the motions.
Number 5?
3.
3, okay. So members of the board, we have an ability to vote on item number 3. If anybody wishes to make a motion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what does item number 3 do? It just changes the zone to allow residential in the CDD 3?
If Mr. Sulkus could answer the question, please, from me to you.
It's literally moving a line on the map because the property is bifurcated. Part of that property is CDD 3. Part of it, which just happens to be the wetlands, which is the green portion that was up on the map previously, is zoned, I think it's at R12 and a half. So they're just asking to make the zone line match the property line.
Somebody wish to make a motion on that particular? Nobody's wishing to make I'm sorry. Mr. Mortimer?
I move to approve as presented the position of John Nuff, Esquire, for a change of zone to construct a residential complex at map 025, block 207, parcel 50A, of which Casey Associates LTD Partnership is the owner. Effective date, December 9th, 2022.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ms. Austin? Thank you.
Second.
Any further discussion on this particular motion? Mr. Mortimer, is your, that's okay. There being none, would you call the vote, please?
Ms. Austin?
With the motion.
Mr. Casterdelli?
Yes.
Mr. Hirsch?
With the motion.
Mr. Cater?
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian?
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer?
With the motion.
Mr. Zaharides?
With the motion.
Vice Chairman Sadi?
With the motion. This one passes unanimously. Mr. Sulkus, just so we're clear, there are 2 other items that we could have voted on, but it's your view, and we'll talk to the applicant, but it's your view that we can't vote on those because of the denial of the zone change?
The applicant, if they would like to still re-subdivide the property as they're showing it, you could vote on the re-subdivision. I don't know that the applicant necessarily may want to do that depending on what future development, so we can ask the applicant.
Thank you. And Mr. Attorney Nuff?
Okay, yeah, he's indicating that he would like a vote on the re-subdivision, which would establish the 2 lots.
And just for our purposes, I notice now we have 2 number 1s, but this is number 3 of 589 Bridgeport Avenue. Is that accurate, Mr. Sulkus?
You're talking about the
subdivision. Is that number 2 or number 3 of
are you on the motion sheet or on the agenda?
on the agenda first, and we go to motion sheet.
Okay. So yes, it would be number 2 on the agenda with the removal of the special permit and site plan review. It would be just the re-subdivision.
And then on this, which number would be on the motion, Mr. Sulkus, please?
It would be the fourth. It would be the 4th item, and it would have to be modified to remove the special permit and site plan review. And then it would be just for a re-subdivision, and then you would want to add to that a modification that the applicant preserve the open space, don't basically designate the wetlands as open space to be preserved in perpetuity.
Do we have any language for somebody if they wish to make said motion?
Excuse me? What?
And the motion sheet, is that on there?
No, because that's an issue that came up this evening.
Okay. So we can make a motion if anybody wants to, and Mr. Sulkus can assist in making the motion. Mr. Hirsch?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, does the applicant wish to have a motion made with respect to an easement?
He appeared to indicate as he was sitting there, but I'm not sure what his thumbs up meant.
Correct. Perhaps council could assist in drafting the motion in such a way that would make it likely for us to approve it, if possible.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
The applicant has requested that a vote not be taken on that item tonight and that a motion be crafted so we can work out the specifics of the open space for the next meeting.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you very much. And I believe that we've taken care of all matters that we could take care of by vote or postponing on the matters that were presented by Attorney Nuff.
That is correct.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is 1620 Boston Post Road, CDD 5, a petition of Corey LeBlanc, Phase 0 design for a special exception to allow Hartford Healthcare to utilize a portion of the structure on map 100 block 804 parcel 8A, of which BPR Milford RSK LLC is the owner. Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. Thank you.
Yeah, for the record, my name is Matthew Whitmer. I'm a principal with Phase 0 Design Architects of Simsbury, Connecticut. And with me is the signatory on the application, Corey LeBlanc. He's a design professional and associate also with Phase 0 Design. And the item before you tonight has to do with 1620 Boston Post Road, which is known as the Ethan Allen building. It's a retail furniture store right now. The tenant is looking to subdivide that into 2 separate tenants. The building right now is about 20,460 square feet. It's sometimes referred to as different numbers in different literature, but that seems to be the correct square footage. 10,000 square feet, or the back portion of that, would become a Hartford Healthcare office use, medical. And medical is not permitted in the CDD 5 zone. The remaining 10,460 square feet, which is the space that would continue to face Boston Post Road, would remain in Ethan Allen. We have put together some documentation, as well as with Mr. Sulkus' help, a site plan application as well, which identifies how the parking would be basically divided up amongst the 2 tenants. There is sufficient parking on this parcel as it stands now to accommodate both uses. And part of that was based on a declaration of reciprocal easements and restrictive covenants that was created back in May 31st of '06, which still stands, which allows Ethan Allen to pick up an additional 7 spaces in the area where the hand is right now, basically that gray area, or that purple area right there, which provides the spaces required for the Ethan Allen use. None of the work that's being proposed in any way negates the restrictive covenants in the reciprocal easement. I'm just letting you folks know that for your edification. And we're also not increasing the square footage of the building. We're not increasing any impervious area. We are not impacting the existing landscaping as it is now. And we are adding a dumpster enclosure on the rear of the building right there, which will be fully enclosed with a concrete block wall, metal gates. The main entrance to Hartford Healthcare will have 2 handicap spaces dedicated to it. We will be extending the sidewalk in that area with a curb cut and access, and providing a new storefront for the Hartford Healthcare. We are aware of a medical use that was allowed in the development next door. I believe it's a Go Health facility. So this is very similar to that type of use. It's basically a doctor's office that operates between 9 and 5 every day. There would be a number of doctors in there that would see patients on a pre-scheduled basis. This elevation here shows a little bit of what's being proposed for Hartford Healthcare on the side of the building. It's basically some storefront, signage. There's some Alucobond panels, which is part of Hartford Healthcare's tenant criteria, if you will. It's their look in terms of the architecture. The rest of the building right now, which is painted CMU, would be covered in a hardy plank material to look like basically a siding, if you will, a wood siding. I think there's some cultured stone on the base and then some metal storefront. And I don't think I have anything else to comment on, but I'd certainly be available to answer any questions.
Any members of the board have any questions?
Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Castagnoli.
Is this an urgent care center?
No, it would not be. It's not, I believe it is only by appointment, so it would be a specializing in some element of...
So it's by appointment, so it's really just a doctor's office?
Correct.
Okay, and how many doctors would be in there?
I'm not sure, do we ever get that? No, they didn't provide us with the number of employees or doctors that would be on...
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Approximately 45 employees. So I don't know how many of those would be doctors, how many of those would be...
Okay, 45 employees?
Yes.
Okay, and would they provide outpatient services and surgery, minor surgery?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so this is a sizable facility?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castagnoli. Anybody else? I do have a question to Mr. Sulkis. We had, when this was presented, it was pending as engineering and fire marshal. Normally, we do get the engineering report before we make a decision. Is that any idea how soon that would be coming?
It's a already existing building, so I don't know that we're going to get anything from engineering. But what we got, which is in this particular case, more important than engineering, we got our sewer commission approval because there's a different fixture count. You know, there's more sinks and toilets and bathrooms. But the site itself, other than the trash enclosure and the ramp, nothing is changing, so there's nothing really for the city engineer to comment on. The driveways aren't changing, nothing is changing.
And lastly, there was no fire marshal report that was pending. Would that be a similar answer to engineering?
That would be, let me just see if we got anything. I'm looking. Yeah, I don't see that we received anything. And again, in this particular case, often when there is a change in the parking area and aisles, the fire department will comment. Again, nothing is changing outside that's going to affect access or the drive aisles.
And really what we're doing now is we're asking for an exception to the zoning regulations, and you determined substantially zoning compliant?
What's going on is the use is, a special exception is a use that's not specifically called out in the regulations and not specifically prohibited. So the regulations talk about one being able to apply for a special exception if the use is similar to something else that's in the zone. In this particular zone, the board has approved this use as a matter of, right next door to this. And actually, all of these sorts of uses within the CDD5 zone, there's others, and I think even in the CDD1, because this particular medical use isn't called out, the board has approved. It's viewed as, we sort of view it as an office, but it's.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I see three people that are not sitting up with us. One is Mr. Griffith, but this is a public hearing, and for purposes of following up on the rules regarding public hearings, anybody wish to speak either for or against this particular application? I see nobody moving, heading towards the stand. I have anybody objecting to me closing the hearing? I see none, so I'm going to close the hearing, and I'd listen to a motion. If somebody on the board would like to make said motion. This is about a special exception for the applicant. Mr. Cater, you can help us out. I appreciate that.
Okay, this regarding 620 Boston Post Road, I move to approve as presented the petition of Corey LeBlanc, Phase 0, designed for a special exception to allow Hartford Healthcare to utilize a portion of the structure on map 100, block 804, parcel 8A, of which BPR Milford RSK LLC is the owner.
Mr. Castagnoli was second. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, would you take a vote, please? Meg?
Ms. Austin? With the motion. Mr. Cassidy?
Yes.
Mr. Hirsch?
With the motion.
Mr. Cater?
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian?
I'm with the motion.
Mr. Mortimer?
With the motion.
Mr. Zaharides?
With the motion.
Vice Chairman Sadi?
I'm with the motion. Good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
There's no old business liaison reports. I have one. It'll be brief. We did have a meeting last week. We found nothing that would impact Milford, but one thing that I did notice that there was a application in Hamden to deal with ADUs, and hopefully it'll get circulated at an appropriate time. And that's for the Southeastern Council, South Central Region of Government. We call it SCROG. Subcommittee reports. There's a regulation subcommittee meeting that we had last week. I am pleased to announce that we had two more board members, Mr. Hirsch and Mr. Mortimer, along with myself, the chair, and Mr. Collegian. The three of us are working diligently on at least one proposal. We now have two. So what we have before us tonight is that there are proposed regulations being submitted by the regulation subcommittee to this board. 2210 is for ADUs, and 2211 deals with electric motor vehicle charging stations. The purpose and role of us tonight is to allow this to be circulated to the appropriate agencies, including Southeastern Connecticut regional governments and the like. So if there's any further discussion, I'll look to right or left. I just need somebody to make a motion to allow this board to circulate to the appropriate agencies. Once that's done, correct me if I'm wrong, once it's done, it will get onto our agenda, and we'll have a public hearing on this, and it's not a question of what our positions are right now, it's just a matter of getting it circulated. So we have a motion to do that. Mr. Cassignoli and Mr. Austin, you going to second that? Sure. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Mr. Hirsch?
Mr. Chair, we're not agreeing to the language as is for our purposes. We're agreeing or voting merely to present the language that we had talked about at the subcommittee hearing to other agencies for their input.
That's accurate. Can we do this by voice affirmation? All in favor, aye? Aye. I notice everybody's hand up. My hand went up too. So that's unanimous. We have approval of minutes. Everyone make a motion? Mr. Cassignoli, Mr. Mortimer, with second. Okay, Chair's report. Part of my liaison report, but as of next year, we have education requirements for all members of the board. And one of the things that was addressed at the most recent regional meeting dealt with that. Right now, there's going to be educational seminars. There's one going to be put on by the Connecticut Bar Association. Unfortunately, it may only involve daytime presentations. But the point is, I've asked about this quite a bit, and I know that there's regional people, but I suspect that come the beginning of the new year, we're going to be given opportunities to get it's required 4 hours minimum, and we're going to have some alternatives to get those hours. But I expect that Mr. Sulkus will do the excellent job he's done. He'll follow up on getting us the education, but we do have to get that. And I'd like to get it done earlier than later, except for those that don't feel that they're going to be around until December of 2023. So with that said, that's all I have to say. There is still one other item on the agenda. That's the staff report, and that's going to require some action. And Mr. Sulkus, if you explain that to the members of the panel, please. If I can interrupt,
thank you.
We have to approve the calendar.
Yeah, I needed to scroll my agenda down. That's why. So yes, so I have just scrolled it and I see that item. Yes, it's that time of year where you have been provided with a proposed calendar for your schedule of meetings for next year. We're required to get that into the city clerk for posting per state statute. So if you have looked at it, if you have any questions, let me know. But I believe there's 1 or 2 days, one being election day, where instead of it being on a Tuesday, it'll be on a Wednesday. And I believe that, I think in July, I think the 4th of July falls on a meeting night, so the meeting would be the following day as well.
So members of the board, we need a motion to approve the calendar as submitted. So it's already will be part of the record. Mr. Hirsch, you can make a motion?
Yeah, make a motion to approve the 2023 Planning and Zoning Board meeting calendar. Thank
you. Mr. Zarides, would you like to second?
Second.
Thank you. Voice vote, all approving? Aye. It's approved unanimously. And then there's one last motion. I leave it to whoever wishes to jump in first. No, Mr. Cassignoli, we don't need a second on that. Everybody have a good holiday. We'll see you guys and ladies in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much for your help tonight.